This is Katinka.
And this is Simone. And you are listening to the Novotech podcast.
In this episode, we interviewed Fernanda Sassiotto, the head of engineering for market data at IRESS. We talked about changes in the tech industry from the last decade, such as companies focusing on creating better company culture by hiring the right people who are not only good at technical skills but can also work together and collaborate as a team. Consequently, leadership style is changing as well. It's important to lead with empathy and trust people that they will do their jobs. In the view of the pandemic and otherwise, the importance of work-life balance has become even more evident. Measuring performance should be outcome-based instead of reporting on the number of hours. We also talked about building highly collaborative teams, which starts with hiring the right people for the cultural fit, creating and sharing the vision, and with leaders not making all the decisions and understanding they don't know everything. In terms of learning and career progression, we learned that finding yourself is a marathon, not a sprint. We hope you'll enjoy this episode. Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Fernanda is a senior IT leader with extensive experience delivering and managing cross-team initiatives over multiple sectors such as telecom, energy, real estate, and finance. Fernanda is passionate about building and leading highly collaborative teams and ensuring there is alignment between delivery objectives and strategic goals of the organization. Welcome, Fernanda. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks, Katinka, and thanks, Simone, for inviting me to be part of your podcast.
It's our pleasure. So, Fernanda, please tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into tech, and also what you do as the head of engineering market data at IRESS.
Yeah, thanks again, Katinka. As you said before, I'm the head of engineering for market data at IRESS. So IRESS as a company provides software solutions for different areas in the financial services industry. That includes wealth management, for example, as well as stock trading and market data. And I'm in the market data, sort of the stock trading and market data side of IRESS. So I lead a team of about 60 people, and it's a team of developers, BAs, quality analysts, delivery leads. And they are responsible mainly for receiving and processing data feeds from different providers, such as stock exchange, for example, and normalizing that data, ingesting the data, and then distributing that across different applications and third-party applications as well. So that's basically what I do. I lead the delivery of initiatives related to market data at IRESS. A little bit about me, how I got into tech. My career is fairly traditional. I think since a young age, I was always interested in maths and science and the STEM subjects in general. And I think for me, a big influence to get into tech was my father. So my father, he was very much, interested in technology. And I came from a very small town in Brazil, and where access to technology was very difficult. But my dad was always, he bought our first computer, he bought our first mobile phone, even though it was quite rare for someone in our town to have those things. So we could, I guess in today's terms, you could call my dad as an early adopter. And that was, I think a huge influence for me to get into technology. I studied computer science, so I went to uni and studied computer science. And after that was just very, very linear and very traditional from there. I graduated and I got my first job in Brazil, working in a technology role, in a development role. And I did that for a few years in Brazil until I had the opportunity to move to Australia. So 13 years ago in 2007, I was headhunted for a role here in Australia. And I think to me, that was very much a turning point in my career. It was really scary for me to move countries by myself, but once I did, I never looked back. And yeah, 13 years later, I had so many different roles, and today I'm the head of engineer for market data at IRESS.
You have worked in software delivery across different sectors such as telecom, energy, real estate, and now finance at IRESS. Have you observed any differences in approach even though they are all following agile methods?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are, I guess the answer is yes and no, or maybe it depends. There are differences, that's for sure. But in my experience, the companies are very much following similar principles. So companies are trying to get closer to their customers or to their clients to understand their real needs. They're trying to shorten that development cycle and to work on incremental delivery so that they can get the product or the software to their clients quickly for them to start using and for the company to start getting feedback on that product as well. There's also a big focus on quality, the quality of the product itself. And I guess there is also an element of creating a good culture and a sustainable workplace and trusting people to do what they do best. So I think in terms of principles that the companies are trying to follow, they're all very similar. But then to facilitate and to help implement those principles, they might choose to use different frameworks or different methods. So for example, I've worked in companies where we were using purely Scrum and, Scrum practices, such as the 2 weeks sprint and the sprint planning and retros and things like that. And then I also worked in companies where we used the scaled agile framework, so SAFe, and worked in places where the company was using a model similar to the Spotify model with squads and tribes and guilds and things like that. And I guess lastly, at IRESS, for example, we have our own IRESS delivery framework, or the IDF, which is based on agile systems thinking and lean principles. So I guess there are many different frameworks and methodologies that companies use, and there are differences between them. But I think at the end of the day, the principles are very similar. But companies, they need to choose what's best for them. So there's no such a thing as one size fits all. I think that the companies, in my opinion, they're living organisms and they change over time. So they might decide to start with one type of methodology or with one approach, and later on move to something else as they evolve. So I guess at the end of the day, it depends on the maturity level of the companies, and it also depends on the different constraints that the companies need to operate within. And I think all of that will help in choosing the right framework for that company to operate. So I guess it was a long answer to probably, yes, there are differences in frameworks and companies do it in different ways. But the way I summarize it, they all have different flavors, their own different flavors to doing agile.
Yeah, I like the way you put it at the end in terms of, the company is a living organism. So which means it proves for me that it's basically using one of their own ways of working from DevOps, which is the feedback loop. So that's a very good example of using the method itself into how you're going to do the things in day to day, and you get better. You learn from your mistakes quickly and you adapt quickly.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that approach is not only applicable to product development or software development, but also applicable to the way that we operate within the companies, and even, to ourselves. Like, we are always trying to learn and we are always trying to adapt. And the way you do that is by trying something, and if it doesn't work, and what's the worst that can happen in our case is that we learn from it and we evolve and we move on. So that's the approach that I take with my life, and with how I do things. And I think when I go into a role as well, that's my approach in terms of leadership and guiding my teams, towards implementing something similar to that.
Continuing on that topic, but from a different perspective, what are the biggest changes you have noticed in the last few years within the engineering industry? And why do you think that is? Why do you think change is happening?
In terms of changes, I think the biggest change I have seen from maybe even from when I migrated to Australia to now, it's related to company culture. So I think today there is a lot more focus on creating a good culture in terms of company culture. And I'm not talking about the modern offices with the table tens tables and the free breakfast and free food and things like that. I'm talking about hiring the right people for the job. I'm talking about hiring not only for technical skills, but hiring people that know how to work together and know how to collaborate. So to me, that's the biggest change, that focus on hiring people for the cultural fit rather than the technical fit. And I think with that also comes a very big change in leadership styles. Maybe 10 years ago, the focus was on that very much the command and control, the micromanagement type of leadership, the managers that like to tell people what to do and how to do things. But nowadays, it's a lot more about leading with empathy and again, hiring the right people and trusting that they'll be able to do their jobs and just being there to coach them and to help them along the way when they need you. So it's really that creating that trust between the leader and the team. So yeah, to me, that cultural evolution is one of the big changes that I've seen. And I think to help with that is also focusing on the pace of work. So creating that sustainable pace of work and a little bit more of a work-life balance for employees and for people in the teams. And I guess if there is a silver lining to this pandemic, it's the fact that everyone now, it's a lot more conscious of what's important to them and spending time with family, spending time at home, doing the things they love. It's a lot more important now, and it's perceived to be a lot more important now. So I think that's definitely a change that came to stay. And for companies and for leaders, creating that pace, that sustainable pace of work and that good work-life balance for the employees, I think that's a change as well that is only continue to evolve, but it's here to stay.
So I just have one follow-up question about the cultural change and cultural evolution. So do you think this is somehow the result of also our adoption of agile methodologies and agile ways of working? So just thinking about cross-functional teams and the importance of being able to work in a team. So is there a relation, you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what Agile is about. It's about empowering the people in the teams and giving the team members autonomy to make decisions, because at the end of the day, they have the skills, they have the knowledge. So they should be in charge of making the decisions that affect their teams or their products. So yeah, it's very much so. I think that not only impacts the culture, but also impacts the leadership as well. Because all of a sudden, it's not all about me as a leader and me telling you what to do or how to do, but it's about me empowering and hiring the right people and empowering them to make the right decisions. Because I know that at the end of the day, they are the best. They're the best people to do the job. They are the ones that have the knowledge and have the skills. So yeah, definitely, I see a relationship there between agile and culture. Yeah.
Well, exactly. You mentioned in terms of specifically now this pandemic. So I know you changed jobs recently during this pandemic lockdown time. What would you say was different this time about the whole hiring process and onboarding. And as well, is there any particular change that you think came to stay that has helped the outcome and should stay even after we are back to our offices?
Yeah, obviously, with my hiring process, it was all done via Zoom. It was really different to have done all the interviews and even have started a job without, having met anyone. I haven't met my team members in person. I haven't met my peers, my boss. I haven't met anyone. So it's a very surreal feeling. And for me, like the decision of changing jobs in the middle of a pandemic was again very difficult because it was right when daycares were closed and all of a sudden my son was at home. And obviously I had the fear of getting sick. And then obviously, it's a big change in my life and daycare was closed and I had to find ways to interview and get to know people over Zoom. So it was really, really overwhelming. But I think, thankfully I have a good supporting husband as well and good supporting network that helped me make the decision. I did think it was very nerve-wracking, and I did think about pulling the pin many, many times before I said yes to the job offer. So on the outside, it might seem quite an easy decision, but it wasn't. It was very difficult for me because I was also moving from working 4 days a week to then going back to full time. So there was a lot of changes happening and things that I had to weigh and decide whether it was the right move or not. But I'm really glad I did it, and I'm really happy, and I wouldn't have done it any other way. But in terms of, I guess you asked me whether there are any changes that are here to stay or not, and I think definitely yes. I talked a little bit before about flexibility and about that focus on work-life balance and creating flexibility. So I think yes, I guess creating flexibility for employees to either work from home or work in a blended model, a bit from home and a bit from the office, and spend time on the things that bring them joy as well. It will be very important for companies to attract and retain people in the future. So I think there'll need to be, from a leadership point of view, a lot of focus on understanding how do we create flexibility for employees to be able to do, their hobbies and spend time with family and not spend time commuting as much, and how do we allow that?
Yeah, it's interesting what you said, because there's some companies, the big IT companies, they went one or more, I don't know, steps ahead and said that their employees can work indefinitely from home. So regardless of when this pandemic is resolved or not, they won't go back in their change in terms, okay, you can work from home, like as long as you deliver, of course.
Yeah, and I think, it brings a big change. I think even before the pandemic, things were already changing, where it's not only about the time you spend in the office or how many hours you spend in front of the computer, but it's all about outcome based and the outcome you're able to deliver. So it doesn't matter how many hours you work, but as a leader, I would be looking at outcome instead of hours of work that people put in. And I think Atlassian and other companies have said that their employees can work from home indefinitely. But it's interesting to see that they're not shutting down their offices, they're keeping their offices. And I think, if you look at Atlassian, I think they're building a brand new office in Sydney and all that. Because I think the future will need a bit of a blended model, because there is that cultural element that unfortunately it's very hard to get when you are over Zoom. So I think, maybe for meetings, for team building activities, you still most likely will want to go into the office or, meet your team members face to face. So maybe that's what the office will become in the future, that place where you go for a team building activity, for workshop, for deep collaboration. And then perhaps, your day-to-day work, it's something that you can do at home. So yeah, I'm not sure if I would see companies closing down the offices and sending everyone home indefinitely. I think in the future it's going to be a blend of the two. Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people would agree with that. Like a 50-50 approach would work well for so many of us. So we talked about highly collaborative teams. So starting at the hiring process, how do you usually set up your teams for success? Is there a certain approach you follow?
I think I've mentioned a little bit in my previous answer around hiring the right people. And I think that's where everything starts. You have to hire the right people for the job. And what I mean is, obviously, you need to hire someone with the right level of technical skills to do the job. So they need to know how to do the job. But I think to me, the most important element to recruiting someone is that cultural fit, and is hiring someone that's excited to work together with the team and work together with others to solve the problems that we have and achieve great outcomes. I think to me that's the first thing I would look at. And then from there, it's really important that people understand why they are there and how their work contribute to the big picture. So I always put a lot of focus and emphasis on sharing a vision, and so creating and sharing a vision, and really have a clear strategy to back that vision. So having a strategy to that will lead you to achieve that vision. And I think sharing that with your team and making sure that every single person in each of the teams understand how their work contributes to achieving that strategy and that vision, it's very powerful, and it really motivates the teams and brings in that collaboration, because all of a sudden we're all supporting the same goal, we're all behind the same cause. So I think that's really important. And I think the other aspect of highly collaborative teams is that the teams themselves have autonomy to make decisions. And obviously, there needs to be some alignment in terms of everyone understanding what the vision is, the strategy is, but then ensuring that as a leader, I'm not trying to make all the decisions or know everything. That's why in the first place, we hire the best people. So yeah, for me, I think that's how I usually approach building highly collaborative teams. So there is that element of hiring the right people. There's the element of sharing that clear vision and clear strategy. And lastly, making sure that I'm giving my team members autonomy to make decisions, and that I'm there for them to coach them when they need me, but I'm not there to tell them how to do the jobs.
I also have a question before we move on. So, is there a difference between high-performing teams and highly collaborative teams? Or are we kind of referring to the same thing here?
I mean, that's my opinion, right? My opinion is you can't have a high-performing team without having a highly collaborative team. So I think they're very much, intertwined and related. That's how I see it. So you can't have one without the other. Yep.
No, that's actually a good point. Okay.
And what other advice would you give to people wanting to start a career in tech, and especially those wanting to move into leadership positions?
I think if you're wanting to start a career in tech, the first thing I would say is start with a formal type of training. I would say, university is great, obviously, but it's not for everyone. So there are many boot camps and many online courses out there that offer a very solid foundation for you to start with. So I would say, obviously, a good foundation is the best way to start, through a course of any sort. And then if you're looking to follow a similar path like me, that you joining a organization, I would say look really short list the companies that you want to work for, like really look for information about the companies that you want to work for, do lots and lots of research about the company itself, and make sure that the company that you're joining align with the values that you have. So I think it's really important that that is a good cultural fit from both sides. So really be critical about where you choose to work. And you have to do that by speaking to people, and there's a lot of stuff online, but if you know anyone that's inside the company, that's even better. I think for people wanting to start a career in tech as well, I would say you have to have mentors, and I would say two different types of mentors. One of them being a technical mentor, because in tech, I would say most people would start, in technical positions. So try and find a technical mentor that can help you master your craft and master your technical skills. And then on the other hand, finding as well a mentor that can help you navigate relationships and build your soft skills and navigate the day-to-day challenge that you'd have in a company. So I guess, two types of mentors. Keep pushing yourself to do the uncomfortable things. It's really hard, but yeah, that's another advice there. Keep pushing yourself. And for me, the other big one is don't be too focused on money, and don't let money drive your decisions. Like with technology, and I guess with any careers, there are many different paths you can follow. You can you can keep moving up, having a very linear career of moving up the ladder, and that's a valid way. But you can also step sideways or even step down if you have to, if your aim is to learn something. So like, be creative on how you approach your career. There's not only one way, there are multiple ways you can get somewhere. And sometimes you have to go around, sometimes you have to go back to the beginning, and that's all really valid. So I would say, if you're only thinking about money, you're always looking, for the next role, for the next level up. And, it doesn't always work like that. So be open to different ways to navigate your career. Seek feedback. Again, spoke about feedback before, but I think always seeking feedback and being open to feedback. And I think the key here as well is to seek feedback from the right people and not from anyone. I think I would say that you have to take feedback with a pinch of salt a little bit. Like, you have to really be clear on the intention that people have behind giving feedback. So make sure that you choose the right people that have an interest in you and developing your career, and ask those people for feedback. I myself have had terrible experience with with feedback, and I think that just really highlights that you have to hear feedback from the right people. And I think when it's delivered in the right way, it can be so powerful. But if it's not delivered with good intentions, it can really drag you down. So just be mindful of that. And having a good supporting network as well. Like I said, for me to be able to change jobs and do all that during a pandemic, I couldn't have done any of that if I didn't have my husband, didn't have friends around me and my family, people that I could talk it through and could give me advice as well on whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, or even people that I could vent and, just have a laugh and vent. That's really important too. But I think above everything, try and be kind to yourself. It's the long journey. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And don't be too hard on yourself, which, I'm really bad. I should listen to my own advice. I'm not great at that, but try and be kind and be patient.
Great advice. And by the way, you are not kind yet to yourself, that aspect. But I think what I like most in my experience in our area is be comfortable or feeling uncomfortable.
Perfect. I think that's a perfect way to summarize it. Yeah. If you're not feeling uncomfortable, it's because you're not learning. And it's, as difficult as it is true. It is true. Yeah.
Great. I loved all of them.
This is the end of part 1 of our interview with Fernanda, but don't forget to tune in next week when we release the second part of the conversation. We are going to talk about strategic thinking, keeping up with our physical and mental health, learning on the job, and a lot more. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.